So, the unseen pattern is the topic of my talk today, and I went to the dictionary and I looked up the word pattern, and I didn't find what I expected to find there. The only definition it had for pattern was something like the pattern of these holes in this little stand, the pattern of the grains of wood in the planks on the floor, the pattern of the veins of a leaf, perhaps. So that's a pattern that's already there. It's an effect, it's a result of something. I didn't see pattern as in, anybody here do any woodwork? Or build a bird cage, a birdhouse? And you had a pattern for that, right? And if you sew a dress, you have a pattern. And if you knit, you have a pattern. But it didn't give that definition of pattern as an idea that gives rise to something in visible form. And then I wanted to take it even further back to the idea of the pattern inside the little acorn. So that inside that acorn is a pattern of a perfect oak tree. Inside that little maple key, that little seed that's in you. Do you ever take the maple keys and you pull them apart and stuff them on your nose when you're a kid? And there's that little seed in there, and in that little seed there's this pattern for this magnificent maple tree that turns orange or red or whatever color it does in the fall. And that perfect pattern's right in there. When you were a kid, did you know that there was a perfect pattern inside you? Do you know it now? I knew it as a kid. I can distinctly remember being 5 years old and standing in the basement of our house at 24 Roxland Street, which was an old house even then in suburban Toronto. In the basement, I don't remember whether it had a concrete floor or a dirt floor. It had a coal bin in the corner. I mean, it was really very basic. And it used to get so hot in those heat waves in Toronto, we used to move into the basement. Whether we slept there, we must have, because you couldn't breathe upstairs. And my mother was washing dishes in a dish pan in the basement, and I was drying dishes. And I said to her, Mommy, I just know I'm going to be somebody special. And bless her heart, because our family, you know, we weren't the type to be proud. You know, don't get too big for your britches, you're just ordinary people here. But bless her heart, she said to me, yes, dear, I'm sure you will. And I kept in touch with that through elementary school. You know, I did real well. I was kind of leader, teacher's pet, you know, happy, good person. And then, of course, I got into teenagehood. And you know what that does, don't you? The angst and the frustration and the forgetting and the insecurities and the fears. And I started to lose touch with that knowing that I had that perfect pattern inside. Then I got married young and had a bunch of babies, and I really got in touch with that. Because I was just faceless, invisible. I was one of millions and millions of young women just like me. How could I be special? And then I used to take on extra jobs, work 2 jobs and volunteer and run for school board and do all these things so that I would be, you know, known as special, and I never was. Because to me, special at that time kind of meant famous, you know, better than everybody else. And so what I did with that is kind of in a subconscious level said, well, if I can't be special by being the best there is, damn it, I'll be the worst there is. And I went out and started making all sorts of really big mistakes in my life. And totally lost touch with the perfect pattern that was in me, the knowing who I was. But somewhere along the line, I started to get it back. And I started to become aware again of the potential that was in me, of the possibility that was in me, of the pattern that was in me. And of course, when I say somewhere along the line, you know where that somewhere is, don't you? It's when I started on this path of self-awareness, this path of self-recovery, spiritual awareness. And when I say self here, I'm using it in the capital S sense. Because one of the difficulties I have with our New Thought movement and the personal growth movement is we say, and it's true, but I think we get carried away with it, you got to look after yourself first. Now I see that in the airplane analogy, I really do. The plane's going down, the oxygen mask comes up, I got to cover the kid's face before I pass out. I see that, got to look after myself. But it's not true when the house is on fire. You know, I got to grab everybody else first. And that's what our whole life, part of looking after ourselves is looking after each other. Because the other is all parts of ourselves. That's that capital S self. So that's one of the the beefs I have with this movement is we get a little bit wallowing too much and looking after ourselves, you know what I'm saying? So the capital S self is our connection with the infinite, with all that is, with the one mind, with the universal being, you know, and that's complete and it's whole everywhere. And the completeness of that pattern of the infinite being, is all right inside. So it's got nothing to do with pride or arrogance or anything. That, as a matter of fact, it's humbling and awesome to realize that that's all inside of us. So these oak trees grow out of these patterns, and oak trees are all perfect, right? They are. And they have flaws. Because sometimes the wind blows the wrong way, and the oak tree gets all distorted and bent out of shape. Sounds familiar, right? You get too much water, too little water, there's diseases come along. That happens for oak trees just like it does for us. But their treeness is always still there. And our perfect pattern is always still there. In fact, when we see an oak tree that's all unique, and we admire it even more, don't we? For its uniqueness, for its unusualness. And our godness is always here, and it's always unique to each one of us. And as we learn to express it in our own unique way, and so I just knew when I said to my mom, I just know I'm going to be somebody, I knew that I was connected there somehow, and yet that I was unique. And that's the first time I began to transcend, to know myself as something other than body and form. I knew that there was something inside me. Buckminster Fuller was one of my favorite philosophers. It's amazing how many scientists are also philosophers, isn't it? But he says that 99% of who we are is not form. Now, I don't know how he arrived at 99%. Could be just a good guess. But whatever it is, there's a whole lot of us that's not form. Say it's 1%. But the rest of us is spirit, energy. But the 1% of us is the part of us that operates in the physical world. And that's the only place our limits are. The 99% of us that's beyond form is totally free of any of the limits of our physical restrictions. Totally free. Isn't that amazing? The rest of us is totally unlimited. It doesn't need to follow any rules of physical form or time or space, because that's all just in the physical world. So when we persist in living in the physical form, we impose those limits upon ourselves. And that's the importance of stepping outside the humdrum every day, go to work, raise the kids stuff, and know that we're so much more. Because that's only our 1%. It's only our 1%. And it's funny how many people are totally involved with maintaining that physical body. Their life is all about keeping the body beautiful and healthy, right? But the thing is, what's the purpose of the physical body? It's to give my spirit an ability and a means to get around in the physical world. The physical body is supposed to serve me, the perfect pattern in me. So sometimes I think we get ourselves, a little mixed up. So yes, I think we should look after our physical bodies, but we're all going to have the experience of illness sometimes. There's a lesson to be learned in that. We're probably all going to have the experience of death sometime, I expect. Yes, no? There's a lesson to be learned in that. And so most of us are probably going to have disease leading to death. There are other ways, not often. I think it's possible to just decide it's time to stop. But most of us are going to get sick and die, because illness is going to be our ticket out of here. So why are we so intent on fighting it forever? The intent for me is on knowing the purpose of the body, and it's to serve my spiritual existence. So we can transform ourselves from physical to spiritual. That's what we do when we die. It's transformation, right? But we can transform ourselves too while we're on earth. Not a physical transformation. Well, sometimes it's a physical transformation. But a spiritual or energetic transformation is when we wake up. When we realize that our pattern is actually in full bloom right now. Here I am. I'm a magnificent maple. Look around you at this time of year. We were coming out driveway across the road from us, just a bush about this high. I'm sure there must have been some leaves on it, but it was just dripping, heavy, weighted down with these incredible white blossoms on it. This is the time of year that pattern blooms, and it's still here for us too. When you look at the word transformation, form, of course, that's the middle section, but trans means above or beyond, above and beyond. So transformation is going above and beyond the physical, and we can do that. The process of transformation is raising ourselves above. Romans 12:2 says, "And be not conformed to this world, but be you transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God." Transformed by the renewing of your mind. Anybody else say something similar? Ernest Holmes? Change your thinking, change your life. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. That's what it's all about. So transformation is going beyond the physical. It means operating in the realm of mind, knowing that our mind is creative, that our thinking is creative, that the world isn't just happening to us, that all that physical stuff out there is totally beyond our control. Sometimes it seems that way, of course, because all our minds are working in there together. But our minds are creative. And so when we come here and we think positive and we expand and we recognize the pattern in us, we're contributing to the betterment of the entire world. But what we normally do, we do it backwards. So if we want to transform our physical body, for instance, what do? We go out and spend money and we get stuff. $150 for gym shoes, right? Membership at the gym, and of course, we've got to have the clothes. We do all, and then of course we get lots of vitamins and supplements and massage therapy and all those things we can spend money on to transform our bodies. And then, after we thought about that for a little bit, then we begin to think of ourselves as healthy, right? But that's actually the trick, because if we can think of ourselves as healthy first, we start to act like a healthy person. And we find ourselves just doing the exercise and eating the right food and all that stuff, because that's what healthy people do, right? But we need to start by being healthy, and then we do and have what healthy people do. Whereas normally we think it's backwards. We've got to get what healthy people have and do what healthy people. I used to run a lot. Wasn't too successful at it. I used to run 15-kilometer races, but every step I was conscious that I was dragging an overweight body through 15 kilometers. I never once thought of myself as a runner. You know, my friends were all runners, and I was plodding along. If I could have made that transformation in my mind to think of myself as a runner, who knows? Who knows? It's the same with our abundance, our relationships, any of those things. It starts here first. It's the pattern, the idea in our mind that tells us how to get there. We need to be in touch with that. And that's what they will tell you in prosperity workshops and communication workshops and relationship workshops. Change the thinking, change your life. Can't change your partner, can't change your kids. You only make the changes yourself. Anybody ever watch American Idol? Man, can them kids sing, right? And it's just so real to me. You know, with the finalists, they start interviewing the parents and they tell them what they were like as babies. And the moms will say, you know, he just came out singing. Or the mom will say, you know, at 3 years old, she'd go to her room and say, don't bother me, Mom, I'm rehearsing. Those kids knew they were singers. They didn't have to get or do anything, they be. They be first, and that's where we need to come from. So being something special isn't about doing or achieving, it's about knowing. It's about knowing, it's already there. So when I said to my mom, I just know I'm going to be special, I already was. I already was, and I had a glimpse of it for a minute. And then throughout my life, I've had, you know, occasional more glimpses of it. So we need to bring all that 99% of our, you know, our beingness into our experience. So that's pretty simple, isn't it? Well, then how come we're not all the way we think we want ourselves to be. Because while it's simple, it's not easy. It's not easy being green, Kermit said. It's not easy recognizing our magnificence because the whole world is out there trying to convince us that we're not. Right? It's not easy. And you know what? I often think this philosophy is not easy. It's very empowering, it's very liberating, it's free, but it's not easy because it's about self-responsibility. It's about embracing our power and our abilities. It's a lot easier to say, I'm a miserable sinner, turn it over to you, Jesus. I don't mean to put down Christians, but it's easier that way to say, nothing I can do about it, the world just did it to me, I'm a miserable sinner, I surrender. This is harder, but it's simple. Because we know that our thinking is creative. When we take charge of our thinking, we take charge of our circumstances. I just have a couple of quotes from Ernest Holmes I'd like to hear. He says, creation does not mean making something out of nothing. Creation is the passing of spirit into form and is eternally going on. Spirit cannot change, for being all, there is nothing for it to change into. So it's always everything. It's the kaleidoscope, isn't it? Just always changing views of all there is. And then he says, our belief is that anything the mind thinks, it can unthink. If, therefore, by the law of cause and effect, we have produced unpleasant conditions, we should be able, by this same law, to produce an entirely different effect. That's the liberating part. That's the empowering part. But of course, the prerequisite is that we have to acknowledge what created the conditions in the first place and our part in them. Another principle which is fundamental to our practice is that not only what is set in motion can be changed, but the truth known is demonstrated. And that's what our practitioners do when you ask the truth. That's what they're going to do in the unexpected income thing. They're going to know the truth, that there's income coming to you from everywhere. And when they know that, it's going to demonstrate. That knowledge of truth and its demonstration is both simultaneous and instantaneous. Because it's in that 99% that's not limited by the 1. Since we are dealing with that which is limitless, knowing no big and no little, the possibility of our demonstration rests not in the principle, but in the acknowledgement of and the embodiment in it of the ideas we desire expressed. The saying of peace will not produce peace unless back of the word is a realization of the meaning of peace. So when you say, let there be peace on earth, and subconsciously say, as soon as them stupid, ignorant people on the other side of the world straighten up, that's not an embodiment of peace. When you say, let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me, then peace is created. So in the simplicity of our own language, we try to convince ourselves of the reality of that for which we are treating, knowing that in such degree as we have an embodiment of the idea, it is thrown into the mechanical field and must operate. So as much as we can believe it, that's how much it can happen. So I suggest that we are all born with the knowledge and realization of a perfect pattern within us of a perfect life, of love and power and energy and peace and joy. That's our perfect pattern. It's our acorn. That's who we are. It's the spirit within us. So we don't need to struggle to embody that idea. We just need to remember. Remember that I'm going to be somebody special. I already am. And so are you. Namaste.